tell the people what you do?
Someone asked me this morning, what I do for a living, and I was like, how do I explain it? I'm sitting in a little cafe, writing the final chapters of my book. I guess you would say I'm a life coach. Yeah. Took me a long time to be comfortable enough to say that I was a life coach, because I thought it was a bit of a, I don't know, I thought it was a bit airy-fairy, like life coaching, and I was always of that idea, like who needs a life coach? You just live your life, and then kind of fell into it 2 years ago. But I think probably that would be the most apt description of what I do. Like I focus at the moment, my focus is quite a lot on relationships, couples. I mostly coach men at this time, which is very unusual because I started off coaching women, but most of my clients are actually men now. I'm really interested in childhood trauma, healing from childhood trauma, what happens if we don't look at the shadow, the unconscious, the subconscious mind. And that's the premise of my book as well, which I'm in the final throes of.
Right. And you're writing a book.
Yes. So it's called Holding Hands in the Dark. I started writing it a couple of years ago. I actually started writing it 2 years ago. And then actually over the course of the past 2 years, although I've had quite a lot of trauma. I think most people have. In fact, I've never met someone that hasn't. I've never met an adult that hasn't. But when I wrote it, when I first started writing it 2 years ago, I didn't realise that actually most of the kind of big breakthroughs in my life were ahead of me rather than behind me. So I began writing it, and I would go back and change chapters and go back again, and I'll take that bit out and I need to now add this bit in, and I'd done loads of things over the past 18 months, 2 years, and basically held myself back, blocked myself from writing quite a lot of the time. I was like, oh, I don't have time, I've got this going on, I've got that going on, and didn't really appreciate how much the writing was actually channeling the trauma that I was going through at the time. So it was helping it dissipate rather than holding it inside myself. And so I basically a few weeks ago just sat down at my computer and I wrote 35,000 words in 3 days, which was quite traumatic in itself. And yeah, so it's like kind of Holding Hands in the Dark 2.0.
So that's about 10,000 words a day for 3 days.
Yeah, for about, so the whole premise of the book is based on these 3 days that I wrote the book and the 2 years prior to it. So while I was writing, I was going through the things that I was writing about, and it's written in the present tense. It's like, this is happening at this moment, this is happening at that moment, and then subsequently I've written some more chapters since. But the book's in 2 parts. It's called Holding Hands in the Dark, and part 2 is called The Lessons I Learned in the Dark, and it's based on 3 days of darkness that I was in. So it's like in a dark hole for 3 days in this apartment with all the blinds pulled down, with a blanket around me, like this, channeling out all the trauma that I've been carrying in my body. And it was the lessons that I learned when I was sitting in the dark for 3 days. So it's not just like a euphemism. I was actually sitting in the dark at that time as well. So I think it's really cool. It's really quite funny as well. In the middle of all the darkness, I was still doing silly things to make myself laugh. And yeah, so a friend of mine, she's a book writing coach, and she started reading it, and she just phoned me and she was cracking up. She was like I can't believe the things you've written in there. And it's quite hard hitting. It's really quite hard hitting.
So I want to come back to the book, but even just going back to what you said there about like becoming a life coach and not having like maybe the confidence to say it, and feeling like in the past that it was a bit like, what were the words you use, like woo woo, like a life coach. What was like the big shift for you where you realized, like, coming from my perspective, by the way, background, like you coached me before, so that's how we know each other, and you're a very good coach. But what was a shift for you? Or like, okay, this isn't just like woo woo, I'm a life coach or whatever, you know, because maybe the average person walking around, or maybe the average person thinking about it, maybe they have sort of that perspective, or they don't really understand, or maybe they think it could be beneficial, but they don't really know much about it.
So first of all, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What would you describe me as? Because I've coached you before. So how would you describe me?
Yeah.
I've just got water in a wine glass in case anybody wonders what I'm doing. But
Yeah. I would say like a life coach would be a fair description, but I would say like given my experience with coaching and obviously like the program I went through, like I would say like a master level personal development coach.
thank you. That's very nice to hear. Thank you.
That's the words that came to mind, because you coached me, you helped me a lot. I've seen you coach a lot of other people, and I think that you have a way of cutting right down to the root of the problem when you're coaching somebody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's really, really awesome to hear, because I still have, I'll be honest, like I still have some issues with even just what I describe myself as. Someone described me as a healer one time, and I was literally like, she just called me a healer. And then afterwards I was like, you know, one person's healer is another person's coach, is another, like, you know, Barry from the group, right? Barry Ron. I've written about Barry in my book. Everyone gets a mention, but the names are all going to get changed, but you'll all recognize yourself, right? When you see when you read, it'll get a different name, but you'll be like, I know who that is. Like, I would describe Barry as a shaman. I'm like, you're not a coach, you're not a behavior change coach, you're a shaman. You should be out in the middle of the forest, you know, helping people with plant medicine and going through sitting holding their hand while they go through all their trauma. So it's like people give us these labels that we can shy away from, or we, like when you said that they're master, there was a part of me inside that went, what? I used to be a beauty therapist, right? And it's like just, oh no, that makes me feel a certain way. The shift came, to go back to your question, is when I first became a behavior change coach, and I had to put it on my profile because I didn't have anything, you know, and it's for marketing and stuff. And I was like, I don't want to put it on my profile. Like, I don't feel good about putting that on my profile. And I called my friend from back home in Scotland, and she was like, oh, it sounds a bit, you know, a bit full of shit, basically, right? Like, you know, who does she think she is? And I was all in my feelings about it. And my daughter, I've got two daughters, and my oldest one came home from work that night, and I mentioned in passing to her what my friend had said, and she was like, I don't know why you worry about these people, they don't put food on our table.
That's what your daughter said.
Yeah, she's very astute. Not the 6-year-old, this is the 22-year-old. And I was like, do you know what, you're right, like, you're right. And the thing is, if you're, as a young child, if you're the weird one, or the one that talks too much, the one that's got big ideas, the one that's like wants to go out and save the world, and you're from like a very working class environment where everybody just goes and works in the same company, and you know, in my hometown the major employer was IBM, and it was a factory, and every one of my siblings and I all worked in IBM, and that's what people did. I wanted to be an author. I wanted to write movies and be famous and save the world. And you know, my mum used to say, I don't know where
halfway there, by the way.
Working on it. My mum used to say, I don't know where we got you, Ali. Like, I don't know where I got you from. And I felt different most of my life for lots of reasons, a lot of which is documented in the book. But when you're, and I wouldn't say I was necessarily squashed, but I wasn't also, it just wasn't the done thing to be like encouraged to have big dreams and big ambitions. And so when you have that part of your personality, it's almost like it's a very tribal thing. And Scotland's a very small country, and Scottish people are very tribal. right?
Yeah.
Or clans, basically. And if you're the black sheep of the clan, then you do everything that you can to fit in as a child, right? Children do everything they can to fit in with the tribe, because if they don't, then they'll be ostracized, and then days gone by, they would have just died. So there's that's inbuilt in our psyche, that if you don't fit in, you're going to be put out, you're going to die by yourself on the streets. So if you have that mentality as a child, and then you grow up and you still want something different, then to stand up and say, I'm this person, and this is what I believe, and this is what I think, and this is how I'm going to be in the world, I think that's a fear that you're always going to have inside. Like, I'm really, really excited about my book. I'm really excited about the things that I want to talk about. But there's a lot of stuff in it that I will be vilified for sure. There's stuff that will just be like, no, don't agree with that. And one of the chapters is called Clearing the Vessel. And in it, it's got a worksheet and stuff attached. And I literally, in the chapter, I list every bad thing I've ever done in my life. Clearing the vessel, right? The vessel is me. And it's like, these are the shit things that I've done. Because I can't write a book about all the shit that's happened to me and then not write about what I gave back out into the universe. And even when I was writing it, I was like, oh, okay, I did this thing. It was really, really bad. I did this. And I was talking to one of my clients about it last week, and she was like, I can't wait to read that chapter. And I was like, of course, because, people will read it and they'll be like, oh, she's just an absolute a-hole. Look at the things that she's done in her life. She deserves all this stuff that happened to her. Or there'll be people that will be reading it and be like, I've done similar to that. And I know how bad I was hurting when I did those things. And the book's for them. It's for people that are like, my belief is that people do things when they're asleep, right? We have these sayings, it's like woke or sleeping, which I don't love, but people will do anything that they can to run away from their own pain. And that means anything in the world. They will murder people to get away from their own pain.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a saying that I've always had all my life, and I read it somewhere when I was in early adulthood, and it says there's not a person you wouldn't love if you didn't know their story. So anytime I read something that someone's done something terrible, I'm like, what's their story? Why did they do that thing? Why did that person behave like that? And I think that, if I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be like, I'm Ali, life coach, master coach, healer, this little small town girl from Scotland, that people in my hometown and it's not everyone, but some people might be a bit like, who does she think she is? Or, I remember when she did this, and this. If I'm going to stand up and say, look, I'm this person and all this stuff happened to me, then I've also got to put myself out there, own my own story, and be like, but by the way, I also did these other things.
Right. I think it's very interesting what you said about like the tribal aspect of it, being from a small place where people are very tribal and they don't like to sort of stand out. There's a way that everyone does everything, and then you always wanted more. I can kind of relate in a way. I live on an island. It's a small island, and it's the same kind of thing. I think there's kind of a certain way people are accepting, but I mean, like, there's kind of a general consensus of like, this is the way everything's done. And people are very tribal. Like, if you're from the island, then you're from the island. If you're not, then you're not. It's from away. But I do think there's a lot of people stuck in that. Like, they're scared of what people in high school think if they say they're a life coach on Facebook or something,
That was me.
Yeah.
I think you lose people as well along the way. And it's the acceptance that some people play a part in your life, and then they no longer play that part because they don't fit in to where you go in life. And you shed a lot of layers along the way. And the people that remain are the people that's supposed to remain. And I think for people with a growth mindset, 90% of them will fall by the wayside. and the people that stay will be the ride or diers that stay with you forever, and they'll always accept you. They'll always accept every version of you that comes along, the good and the bad, and they want to be part of it. They want to be on your journey, and that was a huge shift as well. It was like, not everyone's going to understand this, and that's okay.
How the hell did you develop this mindset? I mean, were you always introspective and yeah?
I always understood people.
Mm.
Always looked at people. Would watch people a lot. I think I had a high level of intuition as a child that got squashed because it wasn't normal. My 6-year-old has got huge level of intuition. I believe that children are open channels. They don't live in linear time. They can see the future. Frances will talk about things and then it will happen like weeks later, and she's like, I told you that was going to happen. And I'm like, how did you know that was going to happen? But they don't live in linear time. We created time. I think that perception of others and intuition and consciousness is something that we switch on and switch off. I can also be extremely low conscious if I'm not switched on, if I'm stressed, if I'm having a bad day. I could be sitting with someone and I walk away, and 10 minutes later I'm like, they meant that, and I wasn't paying attention. So I always say I switch my brain off or switch on. I remember having this conversation with my coach Phil, and he was like, it's not your brain you switch off, it's your heart center, because your heart's your intuition. And I was like, I just sometimes just switch off, because it can be overwhelming. Like, it can be overwhelming to, like, for instance, I was out for breakfast this morning with this couple that I met, and I asked the question that I ask everyone, is like, don't come for breakfast with me if you don't if you don't want in-depth conversations, right? So can you imagine, right? We're sitting there eating pancakes.
No meal of the day is safe, even breakfast.
We're sitting there eating pancakes, and I'm like, so if you had a golden ticket.
What's that?
If you had a golden ticket, if I give you a golden ticket, right, and you could have any job that you want, what would your job be? This is over breakfast, there's kids, I'm holding the baby. And
that's funny. That's awesome.
And the answer that they gave, people think that they're giving this surface level answer, and they give an answer, and I'm like, oh, my brain goes, right, she actually means X, Y, and Z, and he means A, B, C. I would have always described myself as an overthinker. That it can be exhausting, and that's something that has come up and slapped me right in the face in the past month. If you don't look after yourself when you've got that level of thinking and intuition going on, then it can be quite detrimental. But I think the question was, where did I get this level of thinking from? Is that what you said? I think I've always.
How the hell did you develop this mindset?
I don't. Resilience has been one of them, for sure. I've had a lot. I've been through a lot. I've been through a lot for one woman. I think a lot of people have. I'm not alone in that. But
yeah,
when, I remember one of the first coaches I had, and he was like, tell me a bit about yourself. And I was like, okay, so my name's Ali. This happened to me when I was 10. This happened to me when I was 15. This happened to me. Then I nearly died. Then that happened. And I gave him the Ali Larkin show. And at the end, he just went, okay. And I was like, I've just traumatized him by telling him about my life. I've actually lived it. And I was like, are you okay? Sorry. And so I think resilience plays a huge part in it. It's like you're not down till it's over, right? You're not down. You keep getting back up again. You keep getting back up. We're always getting what we need in any given moment. So and this isn't always an instant thing, right? It's like when bad things happen, we use the term bad, as they always do. I don't just sit there and go, right, okay, my leg's just fallen off, but I'm cool with it, right? You still get knocked down, you still get knocked over, but it's while you're down there in the dark that you're like, right, what am I learning from this? How do I expand? How do I make sure this spiral, this pattern doesn't happen in my life again? What can I do this time that I didn't do last time and will teach me for next time?
What, I know you talked about intuition, having it as a child, and your child being very intuitive. What do you think intuition is?
That's a good question. I think that it is, I'll just say the first thing that came into my head because that must be my intuition. It's a knowing that everyone has deep inside of them.
It's a what, sorry?
A knowing with accent, isn't it? Knowing, and knowing.
Oh, knowing. Yes, knowing.
That everyone has inside of them. But you just have to be tapped into the feeling of it. And everyone has it and everyone can tap into it.
Why do you think it's there?
The first word that came into my head was survival.
Yeah.
But also, I think expand on survival, because we're not just here to survive. It's like expansion, so that we can be constantly learning. It's like, why are we here? Do you remember the first time I asked you that question? Why are we here? Why are we on this planet? Why are more people not asking that question?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think too.
People just get up and they go to work and then they go home and they go to sleep, and it's like, why are we here?
Well, I think it's like the underpinnings of existence that we just kind of accept. It's like, we're here, we've got to survive over here, I guess. And then distraction.
And then we die.
Yeah.
But there's got to be something more, right?
Yeah.
Got to be something bigger. I think there is something bigger, and I think that we're all tapped into it to various degrees.
Yeah.
I think women are especially perceptive to it because it's very much a feminine energy thing, and I think that.
Why do you think that, by the way, specifically with women?
I think women have got higher levels of intuition because we birth the babies. Our intuition needs to be turned on. It needs to be in a way that, or feminine energy, right? If we take it away from men and women, feminine energy, because it's intuition. You need to be able to look at your baby. So my little one was born at 24 weeks gestation. She was 4 months premature. She weighed 650 grams when she was born. She was cared for by multiple doctors and nurses. So I had, my role as a mother was kind of taken away from me, which was extremely difficult. And I already had a child who was born healthy. And so I knew that this wasn't the way that, early motherhood was supposed to be. So it was extremely difficult. And one day I was looking at her in the incubator and I was just like, she looked fine to the outside world. And I was like, there's something wrong with her. And I just got this feeling right in the pit of my tummy. It was fear, visceral. And I looked in and I was like, something's not right here. And within a second of thinking it, her whole body turned grey and she'd stopped breathing. And alarms went off, nurses come running in, they pushed me out the way. A nurse grabbed me, pulled me out the room. My legs collapsed from under me. She carried me out the room. And 10 seconds before it happened, I knew that it was happening. It's like, how did I know? She was pink and she was tiny, but she was pink. And then 10 seconds after I got that feeling in my body, she was grey. She looked like she was dead. I can still see it in my mind now. And the nurses come in, they said her tube was blocked. Now, I don't know if her tube was blocked when I got the feeling or if I just knew that our tube was going to be blocked, but something inside of me was like, there's something wrong with that baby. And all these nurses and doctors, and she's hooked up to a machine, and my body reacted to it before anything else did. That's intuition, and it's mother's intuition as well. And it's not that fathers don't have it; they have instinct. I don't think it's switched up as high as what a mother's is.
Yeah, it makes sense from like an evolutionary standpoint, right? Like they took care of infants for most of our history. So in order for us to be here and infants to survive, there needed to be an understanding if the infant is sick or not. Apart from survival, do you think it has any other play in life or any other service in life?
To guide us on the right path. Anytime I've ever ignored my intuition, it has been catastrophic. Extremely catastrophic. I've gone up and down the spiral of life with the same repeated patterns over and over again. It's the same things happen on a different story, but it's the same patterns, but the story's different each time. And I only really came to that idea probably in the last 6 months, where I was going through a situation that was very much like the situation I'd been in 7 years previous. And I was like, I started drawing these like patterns between the two of them and drawing these realizations about it. And I was like, this reminds me of then. Like what? And the things that were happening in the same sequence. It was like shock, then endurance, then another shock, then endurance, then another shock. So when I started realizing the patterns, I started waiting for the next time, the next thing that was going to happen, and then it would happen. And I was like, okay, right, there's a sequence of events here that's reminding me of something else. So why did it transpire again? Why did it come back? Why did I draw it back into my life with the same pattern again? And I believe that we live in a spiral where we go up and down and up and down, and every time we go back down we have to learn more about ourselves, and then we go back up. So the down's the dark, up's the light. So we want to be living mostly in the light, right? But if we keep getting thrown back into the dark, then it's like, what do I learn about myself this time? And every single time, things have happened, and it's like, I don't know how I survived that. I'm done now, right? I've had enough. I'm finished. I don't want any more darkness. And the universe is just like, meh, you're getting more. Let's see how strong you are this time. And it's strength and endurance.
It's a really crazy concept, isn't it? The deeper you go down in the dark, the more that you learn about yourself. And I think the more you enjoy the light.
For sure. The lower you go, the higher you go. Some people go through life like this.
Yeah.
And you meet people and they're just they live ordinary lives, and they're just like, yeah, life's quite good, right? But they don't light up in the same way. But if you see someone really, really lighting up, you're like, I wonder how much darkness they've seen then, because if they've got that much light, how much darkness have they also seen? Right. I said it to one of my clients a couple of weeks ago. He suffered from depression as a child and like a teenager. And I was like, the people that go through things like depression in their early childhood, child abuse, big traumas, let's call it big T and little t, they usually are destined for the biggest lives. They're destined for the most joy. Because you have to oscillate between the two of them.
It's almost like a test. Like a test of, and this might just sound weird, it's like a test of how much darkness you can handle. And if you can handle it, you can go.
You go back to the light, right?
Go back to the light.
And when you're in the middle of it, I don't know how you feel about this, but like, the most recent darkness, the one where I wrote the book, when I was in the middle of it, there were a couple of times I was like, this is it. This is it. This is the straw that broke the camel's back. I can't take any more. Mm-hmm. This is going to be the thing that breaks me. And it's like, so where do we go from there? Stay broken? Or do you get back up? And this is the thing with intuition and knowing, even while I was in the darkness and I was saying those things to myself, there's still this voice in the background going, yeah, you can handle this. Get back up. Come on, wash your face. Get up off the ground.
Yeah. is that intuitive voice.
The knowing.
You know, you said earlier, like every time that I went against my intuition, it's been catastrophic. And in my own life, I've seen that as well. I'm curious, like in your experience coaching people, would you say the average person that you met is connected to your intuition? Because I feel like a lot of my life, I didn't really, until maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I wasn't really connected to it, or I felt it like, okay, this is what I should do. It was just kind of like, I would just make decisions. I mean, I didn't differentiate it in my mind. Like there was always that voice probably, but I didn't identify it.
I think people, I saw a quote the other day, right? And it said, the same self that looks at your hand when you're 5 is the same self that looks at your hand when you're 45. The self never ages, right? The soul never ages. So the self that we're born with is ageless, right? I'm 41. I don't feel 41. Sometimes I feel 5. Sometimes I feel 14. Sometimes I feel 81, right? It's not got an age. The soul and the self don't have an age. What has an age is the fear-based identity that we created as children. That ages, and what we do is we perpetuate the fear, we add to the fear by either consciously or subconsciously. If someone's living a very fear-based life, they're not tapped into their intuition, because your intuition is pure love. It's what we all are. If you strip away my name, my age, my nationality, what I do for a living, like if I'm no longer Ali, I'm no longer Scottish, I'm no longer 41, I'm no longer a female, what am I left with?
It's the soul.
It's the essence of humanity, right? Of the human existence. So if we strip away Matt, your age, your nationality, what you do for a living, me and you are exactly the same. Our souls are just the same. So we're all connected to each other because we're all just exactly the same underneath it all. And the difference between me and you, or you and your partner, or me and the guy walking down the street, is how much fear we've accumulated over the course of the however many decades we've been here. Which is why children are so clear, because they don't have as much fear.
It reminds me of the religious, like the Bible quote, like everyone's equal in the eyes of the Lord. You know, that whole philosophy of like there's something to you that's more than just whatever label you have on you. And I think there's so much judgment by fear of like, I'm in this camp, they're in that camp, I gotta stay in my camp, I gotta protect my tribe.
Belong. People want to belong to something. But if that's detrimental to you, if staying in that tribe and that camp is detrimental to you, then why would you do it? It's all fear. If it's not love, it's fear. That's it. There's nothing else. And you can tell if someone's acting in love or they're acting in fear. You can tell by the tone of voice. You can tell by eye contact. You can tell yourself if you're acting in love or if you're acting in fear. Your body tells you. Your body feels safe and regulated and in love with yourself, then you're coming from a place of love. If it feels tight and tense and this is how we're going to do this and this is how it's going to look, you can tell by the tone of your own voice and other people's voices. I believe, and this is one of the things in the book, and Barry and I are having a podcast about it next week, and it's like God and the devil. So we all have God inside of us, we all have the devil inside of us, everyone. Remember one time when I was having a conversation with this woman this morning, a GP, and I was telling her about the book and how it all started. So the book starts in 2020, and I said one woman's nervous breakdown is another woman's spiritual awakening, right? So I had what looked like a nervous breakdown, but what I deemed to be a spiritual awakening. And at the time when I started channeling, right, and I was doing automatic writing, and this is all documented in the book. Basically, I wrote a post about this, you might have seen it. 2 years ago at Christmas, I would journal every night before bed, and I'd had a few kind of strange things happen to me over the course of a couple of months. I'd what I deemed to be hallucinations, but what I would now say were visions rather than hallucinations, had been happening to me sporadically. And not religious, raised Catholic, strict Catholic, went to Catholic school, went to mass every Sunday, turned my back on it as an adult. Had kind of started looking into spirituality, but didn't know an awful lot. And one night, it was Christmas night, 2020, so my little one was at her dad's, and my oldest was in bed because we were in the middle of lockdown, and I sat with my journal and I started writing. And basically, my hand started going like this on the page, scribbling. And I was aware that it was happening, but I couldn't stop it from happening. So I was just sitting like this, looking at my hand, like I don't really know what's happening here. And it was scribbling on the page. And then I started writing. And to me, it wasn't me that it was writing it. It was coming from somewhere else. And I wrote about the book. I wrote Holding Hands in the Dark by Larkin. And I wrote loads of things that later transpired. I wrote dates, names. So it's all written in the book. It's all documented. I wrote about planets, stars, temples, extraterrestrial beings, just like constant pages and pages. I drew symbols that looked like, Phil said at the time he thought it was Viking runes. It looked like hieroglyphics. I was just sitting there for about 20 minutes, just writing all this stuff that I didn't know where it was coming from. And one of the things that I wrote about was the dark and the light, and how my role on earth was to help people hold their hands while they sit in the dark and then bring them to the light. That was my role. And what at the time, this night that it started happening, I wrote in the journal, we've all got the capacity to be Tony Robbins, but we've also all got the capacity to be Hitler inside of us. Okay, yeah. we can go all the way over that way, or we can go all the way over that way. We've all got it. It's human capacity. And then when I had the second spiritual awakening, stroke nervous breakdown, but I'm going to call it a spiritual awakening, I realised that we've all got the capacity to be God, but we've also all got the capacity to be the devil. And I'd had a conversation with Barry a couple of weeks ago about it, where he said to me that he'd seen the devil. I asked him if he'd seen God, and he said that he'd seen the other guy. And then so recently, the reason why I'm chatting to him next week is because I said to him, yeah, I've seen him too. And it's the devil that we hold within ourselves, which is our trauma, which is fear. So God's pure love, and I use the term God, and I've got a tattoo on my arm here that says "Give it to God," but it's like it's not the God that we see in the Bible, and the wrath of God, and if you don't go to mass on a Sunday, then you're going to hell. It's not that version, but we've all got this pure love essence inside of us, but we've also got pure fear trauma inside of us as well. And it's which one are we going to tap into? But what most people do is they're kind of tapped into this one, but they don't realize it. So they numb it, right? They numb it with social media, alcohol. It used to be just alcohol and drugs and things like that, but now we've got a whole host of ways of numbing it. We've got Netflix, YouTube, porn, like all of these things. It's like, what can I do that takes away from this tapping on my shoulder? That's like, what is it you're afraid of? What's that fear in the pit of your tummy that you're worried about? So people will be over here feeding the fear, feeding the devil inside of themselves and not realizing they're doing it. Yeah. Instead of sitting with them, like actually pull up a chair and be like, right, sit down, tell me what the problem is. And then if you do that, then you can go and be the God that you're supposed to be, because we're all gods with amnesia, right? So you're supposed to be God in your own lifetime. So one of the main things in the book is I've seen God. I've seen the God inside myself, and I've also seen the devil inside myself, and I know which one I want to be friends with.
Right. I think that's a very important thing to understand, that you're capable of both. And there's a devil and a God inside of you. Have you watched or seen or heard of Jordan Peterson's biblical series?
I haven't watched it, but I love Jordan Peterson.
It's really awesome. For anybody listening, it's like he does a biblical series where he does lectures on the Bible. He goes through all the stories, and they're like 2 hours each. I think there's like 13 of them or something, but really amazing. It's not really religious. It's just like breaking down the psychological and historical relevance of these stories. And what really changed my mind on this is it's very similar to what you're saying, is like the whole concept of light and dark that came from these stories. And it just makes sense from a practical point of view. Like, I think people get turned off from religion where it's like culty, and it's like you take it too serious. If you don't go to mass, then you're gonna, die soon or whatever. But basically just the practical aspect of it, where like the more that you do good and the more that you try to be like move towards the light, be the best that you can be, and the more exponentially like things will get better and better and better, and then the closer you'll get to God. And the same thing goes the other way. So if you're going against your intuition and you're just like, fuck it, I'm gonna drink today, fuck it, I'm gonna do some bad shit today, I'm gonna steal something today, it just goes exponentially down and down and down, and then all of a sudden you're in hell. And that's what hell is. People live in hell. And then heaven is like the opposite. You keep making sacrifices for yourself and to be the best version of yourself that you can be. So just that breakdown really, I found that fascinating. It's exactly what you just said. I think people get turned off from religion in that sense, but if you think about it just from a practical point of view, it's like, of course that makes sense.
And I think if you're in the midst of it and you can't see it, like I was saying this to the couple I was out with this morning. So a few years ago, my mum died really suddenly when she was 63, very young, in 2019. And I always say the Scottish way to deal with things is to drink your problems away. And I just started drinking wine every day. And I realised that it was something that I'd always done to numb the pain of existence, right? Because if you're a big feeler, you feel everything, right?
Yeah.
You feel absolutely everything. As a child, you feel everything, and it gets switched off. It's like, don't cry, don't be upset. Big girls don't cry, and you're like, right, okay, I won't. I'll become this stoic person, and I'll harden my heart. And it's not like I've not got the violins out and like, oh, but that's really hard life. I went through a lot year after year after year, right? And then my mum died, and I just thought, fuck it, right? This just life is just shit. It's just shit. And so my ex-husband was very anti-alcohol, and he would go out to work every night in the training studio he owned, and as soon as he went out the door, I would pour a glass of wine. And then it progressed from a glass of wine to a bottle to 2 bottles. And I brushed my teeth before he came back in, so he wouldn't know that I'd been drinking. And he came in one night, and I picked an argument with him because I was drunk, and he didn't realise I was drunk because I got so well at hiding it. And I got in my car drunk and drove it. And I've written about this in the book. I would say that I no longer carry the shame that I did carry. But I carried a lot of shame about it for a long time. But this is the thing: when you're in the darkness, right, you do whatever you can to get away from it. So you don't know what you're doing. There's another quote in the Bible: "Forgive them, Lord; they know not what they are doing." Right, that was me. It's like I wasn't sitting there going, "Do you know what? I'm going to get in my car and drive it drunk, and if I kill somebody on the way, then fuck it." That's not what was happening. It was just get out the house, get in the car, drive the car. And I drove to the local supermarket and walked in and bought a small bottle of wine. I'd already had 2 bottles of wine, and it was pouring with rain, and it was apocalyptic, and you know, it was like a scene from a movie. I just walked into this bus stop and I opened the bottle of wine, this little bottle, and I started drinking the wine out the bottle. And I just looked around and I was sitting outside a police station. And something inside me was just like, what the hell are you doing, Ali? Like, what's going on? You're sitting in the rain drinking wine after you've just, you know, been in your car drunk. Like, how has your life got to this? And I went home, and I'd like to say that, you know, I woke up the next morning and I didn't drink again. That's not what happened, but it was about 2 weeks later. Something inside of me clicked. Something was just like, stop this, stop doing this. And I was at a kid's 5th birthday party or 4th birthday party. It was a Saturday afternoon. I had half a bottle of wine in the fridge, and I went home and opened the fridge door, took the wine out and poured it down the sink, and was like, no, this is stopping today. I don't know what it was that was the catalyst for it. And so that was in February 2020. When I first of all stopped using alcohol to numb the pain and sobered up, really, and started looking around, that was when I first got into personal development within a couple of months. I've started reading, like, one of my friends, Jack, you know Jack, you've met him, right? So I didn't know that personal development books were a thing until 2020, right? I have always been an avid reader, and I would just buy books in the supermarket. So I read books about serial killers and stuff like that. Right? So I just shoved trash. Like, I love a romance, right? So I would throw a wee romance novel in. Do you know Jack Reacher? You know the Jack Reacher?
Yeah.
Read all his books, all Lee Child's books. I used to read them.
You're in deep in Jack Reacher. In deep.
And I'm a speed reader. So and then I never bought a book off Amazon. I would only buy them from the supermarket. And then I read David Hawkins' book Letting Go, and this is the opening of the book, my book. The first time I'd ever read a proper personal development book, and it was literally the epiphany that book changed my life. Like, I've actually got it here. I take it with me everywhere I go, right? And I tell everyone to read it. And I'm like, that was the book that changed my life, because it made me realize it was like something just clicked inside my brain one day, and it was just like, do you enjoy your life? Do you like it? Are you enjoying this that you're doing? Are you in the right situation? Are you on the right path? And I started reading that book, or I was listening to it, and it was the first time I'd like outer body experience, is the way that I describe it in the book, and massively shook my life up, completely shook it up. Like, you know, left my marriage, started my own business, meditating, journaling every day, writing this book. I was like a completely different person within 6 months of giving up alcohol. Within a year of giving up alcohol, I had a 6-figure business. Like, everything was going up the way because I wasn't in the dark. I was no longer in the dark. I was going towards the light, and the light was good, right? This was the best light I'd ever been in. And, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. I've always spiraled up and down, like I always have. So it's not like when I lived in my hometown in Scotland that everything was doom and gloom all the time. That's not true. It wasn't like that. But if we go back to what you're saying about what you put out, you get back. So I guess the first kind of realization that I wanted bigger happened in 2013. And I still lived at home, and I was a beauty therapist. I worked for a woman that I knew that ran a beauty salon. So it wasn't my beauty salon. I wasn't earning loads of money, but I would earn a lot of money in tips because I had loads of regular clients. So my tips actually were more than my wages. And my friend had moved to Sydney at the time, and I decided I was going to go to Sydney and see her. And I just made this plan that I was going to go to Sydney. As a single parent, I had a 14-year-old daughter, or 13-year-old. I was driving this tiny little car. It was a banger. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to sell my car. I'll walk to work in Scotland in the rain, and I'll save up, and I'll go to Australia on holiday for a month. And I'll take me and Ailey, my oldest daughter. And I had this plan. I wrote it all down. And I remember saying to my mum, I'm going to go to Australia. And she was like, what? I had no savings, no money in the bank. I was a poor single mother. And like my mum had never really been any further than Ireland, which is across the water, which, you know, her family were brought up there. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to Australia. I want to go and see what it's like. I want to go to Bondi Beach. And I went into this travel agent near where I worked, and I sat down across from the guy, and I used to pass him every day on the way to work, and I'd say hello to him. His name is David. And every day I'd be like, hi, David. And I'd go into work with my wee uniform on. And I'd be like, oh, morning. And he was always, hi, morning. I didn't know him very well. And went into his travel agency, and I was like, I'd like to go to Australia. And I had no clue how much it would cost or any of these things. And he was like, right, you know, at his computer, and he was like, and this is like nearly 10 years ago. And he's like, right, flights are £1,200 each. And I was like, what? Accommodation, right? And it was like coming out at £5,000 or something, right? And I was like, I had no savings in the bank, but I earned a lot of money from tips, like a ridiculous amount of money from tips. And I was like, I know I can afford to do this, but I don't have like however many thousand, because we got it down. That was like, I don't need accommodation. I'm going to stay with my friends. We got it down to like £2,000. It's about what, $4,000 Canadian, just under. And he was like, so yeah, we could do it like that. And I was sitting there, and I was like, yeah, I don't have $4,000 in my bank. And I was like, can I like come in every week or every month and like pay it up? Can I do it like that? And he was like, no, you can't do that on flights. You can only do it on a holiday. And if we add the holiday on, then it'll be £5,000, so $8,000. And I was like, and I remember sitting there thinking, what did I do? Did I just give up on the dream? Like this is, you know, and I had decided in the June of 2013 that I was going to be lying on Bondi Beach on Australia Day, the 26th of January 2014. I'd written it down, and that's what I was going to do. And I remember just sitting there, and I was like, maybe it's not going to be. And he was like, wait a minute, I'm going to call this airline and see how much the flights are. And I said, I'd like to go on the 23rd of January and come back on whatever date in February. And he was on the phone, and he was like, yeah, 23rd of January, right, there's a flight from Glasgow Airport, goes via Dubai, she'll land in Sydney on this date, yep, and he's nodding, yep. Goes like this with the phone, can you fly at 11 o'clock on the Thursday? And I'm like, yeah. Thinking to myself, what's going on? And he was like, yep, okay, right. And then he prints this ticket off and hands it to me. And I'm like, so how are we doing it? He said, I bought you the ticket on my credit card. Come in and pay me every week. So you owe me £2,000. Come in and pay me every week. And that's what happened. And I was like, I think that was from how I was always really friendly, and I was always chatting to him on the way into work, and I was always like, and what transpired from that is every one of my clients that come into that salon, I sent them to him for their holidays. I was like, go and see David in the travel agency. He's going to get you the best deal. Don't look online, go and see David. And it was this just like an energy exchange, a mutual energy exchange. And lots of things like that have happened in my life. Like lots. Like I was on Facebook Marketplace the other day. I saw a bike, and I really wanted to buy a bike. And I messaged the woman, it's a brand new bike. She bought it for her daughter. Her daughter didn't want it. Her daughter's like 17. She decided she didn't want it. So it's half price. And I messaged her, and I was like, can I buy the bike? And she said, yeah. And I said, the only thing is I can't come and collect it till next Tuesday because I've got to fly in on Monday. And she was like, oh, sorry, you can't get it then. My husband wants it to be gone in the next couple of days. And I was like, okay, no worries. Thank you so much for getting back to me about it. It looks awesome. Looks an awesome bike. You're going to get it sold, no worries. Just wasn't meant to be for me. It's cool. Have a great day. She messaged me back a couple of minutes later, like, no, actually, I want to sell it to you, so I'm going to keep it for you. And I've thrown in a free bike lock. And I was just like, okay, all right. And things like that happen all the time in my life. So as much as there's lots and lots of darkness, there's a shitload of light as well. A lot.
And do you think that's from the energy that you put out?
I do, 100%. I think if you love people, they love you back.
I have a few questions I came up with.
Okay.
So there's three. I'll just go one at a time.
Okay.
What's I think these are just interesting questions to ask. What's your view on money?
Very interesting question. I think money's energy. That's all it is. It's not real. We made it up. We never used to have money. We made it up and we attached a hell of a lot of importance to it. Everyone's got some kind of story about money. So mine was that money was a bad thing because I grew up in an extremely poor area in Scotland. The rich were them over there and we were us over here and the tribes. And it was something that, you know, I remember like sitting with someone from my hometown one day and looking at mansions in Calabasas with my daughter. And I was like, we're going to live in a house that size. And they were like, why would you want to? And I was like, well, why not? Like, life's a game. Let's have the big house and big car. It's luxuries to be experienced. It's not the be all and end all, but it's to be experienced. And just always having this idea that people have always got the capacity to earn money. So this is what plays into, you've got the capacity to be Tony Robbins. It's just, are you going to live into that capacity? But I would be naive to say that my upbringing didn't play a part in money blocks that I had. And then when I realised what money is, first of all, it's energy, second of all, it's masculine energy. So, because it's grounded and logical and structured, it comes from a system, but it's not real. So you can call it in as long as you don't have any blocks about it. Like when I first started selling my program, I sold it for £600 for 12 weeks. The first sales call I had, I paced my living room, paced up and down, up and down. I can't sell something for £600 for 12 weeks. People will laugh at me, and people have laughed at me on sales calls, right? I've had sales calls where people have hung up when I've said the price, where they've laughed, where they've been like, what? Why would they give you that amount of money? And I'm like, it means something to them that it doesn't mean to someone else. I've had people pay me tens of thousands of pounds to be coached by me. And what £35,000 to one person and £350 to another person is their views on money. It's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
And I went from £600 for 12 weeks to 6,000 for 12 weeks, only by shifting myself. And to a certain extent, the people that are sitting in front of me, yes, right? Because there's some people that just can't afford £6,000 for 12 weeks. But people will pay you in proportion to the problem you're solving. So as long as I know that I can help, and the problems that people come to me with, there's a pretty big problem is they don't know what it is that's holding them back in life. And the thing that you said is that you noticed in me is that I cut right down the middle, and I'm like, and I'm not afraid to ask the questions that need to be asked. It's like, I had a coaching call with one of my clients the other day, and I said to him, we can keep going for another 2 months if you want to, but know that you might end your relationship in the course of that 2 months. That might be what happens, because we're going down a path where that might be the end of the path. And he was like, right, okay. And I'm not afraid to say it to
Ali the stinger.
Yeah, got a stinger for you. I've got a stinger. You ready for it? And you know, I had a call with one of my clients recently, one of my male clients, and he was really upset on the call because and I speak about this in the book as well. Someone very close to him had tried to commit suicide. You and I have had conversations about this before, and I said to him, what is it that you're afraid of right now? What is it you're sad about? And he said, because I thought he was going to die. And I said, or because you think you're going to die. It's not about him, it's about you. Are you worried you're going to die? Are you worried you're going to commit suicide? And it's like, you have to be brave to ask questions like that. So people pay me in proportion to the questions that I'm willing to ask them, and the support that I provide after asking those questions. So I think when you get to the point where you're just like, money's not real, it's not real, it's just like, I had one of my guys come on, he actually was in the coaching program with me, and he asked me to coach him privately, and he came on the call and I talked him through everything that we were going to do, what we were going to work on. And he said to me, how much is it? I said, 25 grand for 12 weeks. And he was just like, I saw him swallowing. And then I was like, nah, I'm only joking. And it's like, Ali. And I was like, but you believed me. You believed me. Because why would I not charge 25 grand for 12 weeks? If the question I ask you that unlocks the part of your brain that's been holding you back for 40 years and your life just goes afterwards, that's worth 25 grand. It's worth $1 million.
Yeah.
So money's just, it's just numbers. It's just noises that come out your mouth. That's all it is. Right? It's like 25 grand or £250. All my mouth is doing is making a different noise. But you attach a story to it. What, 25 grand?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, imagine a baby, right? You're holding a baby and all they hear is blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
They don't know the difference between, if I go to a baby, do you want that? It's £250 or that? It's 250,000. They would just pick the shiniest thing.
Mm-hmm. That should be a quote somewhere. Money is just nonsense that comes out your mouth.
Yeah. just a noise, isn't it? It's just it. That's how I view it. And that's how I made a lot of money last year, just by being like, I don't care. I don't care about it. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It just is a thing. I like nice things. The feminine likes nice things. I like luxury.
Mm-hmm.
I like, I'd rather stay in a 5-star hotel than a 1-star hotel, but I've stayed in both and I've had just as good a time in both. This a story that's in the book as well. It's like, there's this hotel in Brighton and it's absolutely abysmal. It's terrible. It's got sticky carpets. The rooms have no window. It's just grim. I've stayed in there and I've stayed in really nice 5-star hotels and I was myself in each one and I had just as good a time in each one, just as good a laugh with the person I was with, but it's nicer to stay in the 5-star one. I'd rather stay in the 5-star one. And if that means calling in the money that enables me to do that, then all I have to do is remove the blocks to call in the money, because everything's there at our fingertips for us to take. Even in the middle of this, you know, everyone's like, oh, it's a recession and this is happening and that's happening. It's like, if that's how you want to view it, if you think people aren't going to pay me because their energy bill's high, then people won't pay you. If you think I'm still solving problems here, people have got money. I just need to go and find the people that want to spend it, or I just need to call in the people that want to spend it, then you'll make the money.
I love that mindset.
Do you believe it?
Trying my best to.
You just play with it. Like when I said that to my client, it's like, yeah, 25 grand. And there's people that charge 25 grand. I think the number that floats about for Tony Robbins is he's $1 million for 4 sessions. And I'm like, well, if he can be $1 million for 4 sessions, what questions have I got to ask to be $1 million for 4 sessions?
Yeah. 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 What problems do you have to solve or help people solve? What questions can you ask to be the catalyst of the life they want to live?
Some of the best questions that have ever been asked to me have been just totally off the cuff intuition. I've said a sentence and someone's been like, but what about if you did X, Y, Z? And I'm like, whoa, that's just like totally blown my mind that you've asked me that question. That question's worth 10 grand to me.
What happens when we die, Ellie?
What happens when we die? Do you believe in reincarnation? Do you want me to tell you a funny story?
Sure.
My friend, she's wrote a book about past lives and she's really, really into it. And I've always had feelings about past lives, but not really anything. Like, I walked across this bridge in Sydney and I was like, I felt like I'd been on the bridge before, but not that, it didn't look like that when I'd been on it. So it'd been like I'd been in that part of Sydney before, but it didn't look that way. And I got this image in my mind. So last Friday night, I got lost. I'm always getting lost, right? I'm like a terrible driver. And I was Francis and I were out, and it was 10 o'clock at night, and it was dark, and I'm in a hire car, and I'm driving on the other side of the road, and Francis had fallen asleep in the back of the car, and I had 0 battery left in my phone, and my phone was a sat nav, and I took a wrong turning, and I ended up in the middle of this field, dirt track. There was no road, there was no street lights, it was just me and my car in the dark, like, you know. And it's like, right, I'm just about to launch a book called Holding Hands in the Dark, and the universe goes, let's just throw it into the dark and see what happens. And I'll be honest, like, and I this conversation with someone today. I was like, when you grow up in the area that I grew up in as a child, which is, you know, a lot of violence and stuff in it, and also really nice parts, but a lot of you know, poverty and violence and stuff. You don't really get afraid out in the world, because if you're brought up in an environment like that, you don't walk down a nice street in West Sussex and you're afraid because you're by yourself. Like, you've got a certain kind of level of, I guess, street about you that you're like, well, I'm not really afraid. Like, if someone came at me, then I'd be more afraid for them than I would be for me, because you don't want to bump into Fiery Scott Alley. And and but in this moment, I think because I was with Francis and my car, you know, I had no sat nav, and I was completely thrown into pitch dark, and I pulled the car over and I was just sitting there, and I could feel my tummy going like this, and I was like, shit, my phone's going to run out of battery. And I looked trying, and she's like in the back, and I was like, oh. And then I just heard the voice inside me going, remember the trees, remember the trees. And I looked around, and I started to be able to make out trees, and I was like, no, I don't remember the trees. And there's something that I've been hearing ever since I came to Portugal last year. First time I was driving from the south of Portugal up to the north, and I just heard in my head, remember the trees. You might not remember the trees, but the trees remember you. And I was like, remember driving along and being like, I don't know what that means. And I could see you can see all the trees behind me. Portugal's filled with trees. And when I heard the voice saying that, remember the trees, I was just, it was like this sense of peace come over me. And I was just like, I'm supposed to remember something about this part of the world that I'm sitting in, but I can't remember what it was, but I don't feel afraid anymore. And maybe it was just the act of, I talk about channeling, but I also hold things very lightly in my hand. I'm like, I hear these things, but I don't go, oh, that must mean I had a past life and I climbed that tree and I was, 7 and I was a little boy and I was a peasant in the Portuguese countryside. It's like, I just listen to what I hear and I go, okay. And when I heard it, I was like, oh, okay. These trees are familiar to me from another time or something, I don't know. And I just started the car and I managed to get myself out of the place that I was in. And then for 3 days in a row, I took the same wrong turn in, but it was during the day. And there's loads of trees. And every time I took that wrong turn in, I just heard remember the trees every single time. And I was talking to my friend about it, she does reincarnations and past lives and stuff. And she's like, well, you must have been there in a past life. Like, you have to go back and go and find one of the trees and meditate under it. And sometimes I get this flash of it's almost like a memory, but I don't know if it's future or past. And it's me lying in a field underneath a tree that's very much like these trees in the background, and like just lying underneath it and just being there. So I don't know if it's a past life or a future life. So she was just like, go and meditate under this tree. But so I believe in reincarnation. I think that you come back until you learn all the lessons. There's a chapter in the book where I talk about meditating one day 2 years ago, just when I started meditating, and I went into a very, very deep meditation, and I found myself in my consciousness. I found myself in this place. It's extremely hard to describe in normal human words. Like, I can still see it in my mind's eye now, but it seemed to be like, in the way that I describe it in the book, is an infinite room. Right, so it's like just a room that went on forever. The sides went on forever, the front went on forever, the top went on forever, but it was a room, and the back went on forever. and I was running down this room, and I'd been there before, and I was with someone, and I said, it's I've been here before, come and I'll show you where we're going. And I spoke to someone, like someone I know who's very spiritual at the time, and I told her about the meditation, because when I come back I tried to draw the room, and I can't draw for shit, right? I will show you the drawing that I did. In fact, you know what, it's probably here, because I brought this beside me, because this is my journal from 2020, and I didn't know if we were going to talk about, you know, the first spiritual awakening that I had, but like this is what I tried to draw. That's the room. Right? And I was like, and it was on the 31st of, oh no, the 1st of February 2021, and it's just like infinite, right? And I described it to someone, and she was very spiritual. She went, I've been there. And I was like, and her face lit up when she said it to me. She said, yep, I've been there too. And I was like, right, how has she been there? And I've been there. And then one day I was on YouTube, and you know, you go down a YouTube rabbit hole and you're watching a video and you click on another video and then you click on another video. And I could never find this video again. And someone in the comment section wrote, I did a meditation and I ended up in the Hall of Mirrors. And I was like, that's how I would describe, almost how I would describe that room, but it wasn't mirrors. But I can understand why someone would call it the Hall of Mirrors. But it definitely wasn't mirrors. It was just space. It was like a hall of space. And then, so there's a theory, I think it's the halls of Amenti, it's called, where our souls go when we die, and our memory gets wiped and we get sent back down again to learn more lessons. So I'm pretty keen on that theory. What do you think happens when we die?
I think, yeah, I don't know if I have a set theory of like, this is definitely what happens, but I think that I think it's bigger than we can comprehend. I think it's energy. Your soul, your energy gets returned back to the universe, returned back to the universal sound. Some people call it universal sound. But it gets returned back to there, and maybe there's reincarnation. I starting to think reincarnation is probably a thing, but how do you really know? But I think there's something going on deeper than we can understand. And I think that's where we go back to. And I think when people die, they often feel this overwhelming sense of peace. And I think that's where you go to. I don't know if I don't really have a set. I don't really have a set theory on what actually happens, because I don't really think there is one.
I don't think we're supposed to know. That's the game, isn't it? It's like, how high can we get in our levels of consciousness towards it? Like I've seen things when I meditate. I've seen things. I think that it's a bit of an out there theory, but it's one of the main theories in my book as well, that the way that we expand our levels of consciousness is through sex as well. It's through our sexual energy. It's through connection with another person. And I've seen things during sex or after sex that I can't explain. And it's not like I've seen things later happen. So there's a theory that orgasm is the closest we get to God, right? Because it's your body's filled with pure bliss. And I've seen things that have later happened during sex, like I get imprints in my mind. And then I've seen things that I can't explain as well. And when I say that I can't explain it, I mean that I don't have the words, I don't have the vocabulary to explain it. I've seen machines that I can't explain, like things, objects that I'm like, I don't know what that is. I've never seen it before. I don't know what it is. And I can't explain it to someone, which is difficult. It's like, oh, I just got an imprint of this thing. Explain it to me. I can see it in my mind, but I don't know what it is. And I think that's, if time is not linear in the way that we constructed it to be. It's like, well, everything that's ever been created at any given point in any time has already been created. It's already been done. Everything's already been done. It's already happening, you know, one dimension over. So do we then, in moments of bliss, through connection and a surge in sexual energy, through plant medicine, through near-death experiences, do we then tap in to things that are on another plane or another dimension? So exciting, isn't it? It's like, you know, there's people that just like, oh yeah, you die and close your eyes, lights go out, that's it. I'm like, no, that's boring. Like, what if this and this happened? That's exciting. It's curiosity all the time.
I find it exciting too. And you know, it's interesting, like you said, you've seen things you can't describe it. That reminds me a lot of like people's description of like a DMT trip, or I think of, you know, just like psychedelic experiences. You know, even you smoke weed, you close your eyes, it's like, what the fuck was that? Who knows? You know.
I think it's expanding levels of consciousness into something that we have got no comprehension of. Like I've watched a few Joe Rogan episodes where he talks about his time with DMT, and I'm like, that happens to me when I meditate and when I have sex. That's the two times. So meditation, and there's a theory. And when Frances was born, I was rushed into theatre after she was born, and so the way that I describe it is, I was in the labour room. She was literally this little £1 baby. There was, you know, just hundreds of doctors and nurses in the room trying to resuscitate her. She wasn't breathing. Her dad was over at the table with her. I was kind of like in the corner by myself, and I felt, the way that I always describe this is, I felt myself leaving the room, right? And by that I mean earth. I just felt my body just start to shut down. It was like I was falling, and I couldn't alert anybody to the fact that I was. When I say falling, I don't mean like physically falling. It's like I was just going like that. Like my spirit was just going like that. And something happened, that an alarm went off on a machine or something, and they realised that I was losing blood pressure or whatever it was, and they pulled me out the room and pulled me into theatre, and I had an oxygen mask on my face, and I said to the nurse, am I going to die? And the two nurses looked at each other. It was just like, you know, that split second where they kind of done that to each other, and there was a look, like just this look come across her face, and I was like, am I going to die? And she said, no, you're fine. And I was like, no, I'm going to go here. And I took the mask off, and I said to her, will you take my body back to Scotland? My mum would like me to be buried in Scotland. Just, and you said there's a sense of peace that comes over people when they die. Yeah. There was definitely a sense of peace that was just like, this is it. I'm not coming back out this room, and what the hell can I do about it? There's nothing I can do. And I just kept saying to the nurse, can you just make sure that my daughters know that I love them? That was the thing. Just let them know that I love them, tell them I love them, make sure they know it every day. And that was all I cared about, was that they knew that they were loved every day. Didn't care how big my house was, how big my car was, how much money I had in the bank. Like, none of that matters. None of it matters. What matters when you're on your way out the door is that the people that you love know that you love them. And there's a theory that when we die, our bodies are flooded with DMT to take us to the next level. And I don't know, people who have had near-death experiences, and Russell Brand talks about this in his book, is they seem to get into like deeper states when they meditate, or when they try different ways to expand their consciousness. And I don't know if there's a link between the DMT release and something like that, because certainly one of the most deep meditative states I've ever gone into, for the whole day before, I felt this buzzing on this side of my head, and it was like, it wasn't painful, but it's like pins and needles. It was just going like this for a day before it. I was like, this is really, really weird, like this feeling. And my coach at the time was like, you're going to have a breakthrough meditation, go and meditate. And I meditated on my bed. I've written about this in the book. I've still got it all down here in my journal from the 4th of February 2021. And I, for sure, went completely somewhere else in my consciousness. I was completely I was on another planet, right? Sitting on my bed, my body was on my bed, my consciousness was somewhere completely different. I saw visions, I heard bells ringing. It was like I was in what we would describe as heaven. It was like celestial bells, angels, goddesses, wolves. Could hear very soft, loving female voice telling me about the future, telling me this is going to happen, this is going to happen, you're loved, you're protected, just let the love in. And that came after I had this feeling in my head, and I was like, what was this build up over here? Like, was it DMT? Was it something in my body was allowing me to reach higher levels of consciousness? And the times that it's happened since then, as I said, has been like at the point of orgasm, or I've tried psychedelics for trauma as well. And I mean, that's written in the book, and the notes that we took when that happened are just unreal. Like, it was like, if you're an open channel and then you take psychedelics on top of that, there's just like the channel just goes, and every bit of information that's here just comes to the forefront of your mind. So yeah, I think near-death experiences and getting into those meditative states, or getting into those states during sex, is the two of them are for sure linked. So when I heard Joe Rogan talking about his DMT experiences, I was like, they're very, very similar to what happens when I meditate.
Right. Yeah. I think near-death experience, or anytime you're like faced with morality, someone close to you dies, or you almost die. That's something that I know we'll wrap this up soon, but that's something that I really realized, like when I lost someone really close to me and have like lost people, is like you get like spiritual. Like, I would consider myself not spiritual, not religious. All of a sudden, a person dies and I'm thinking and saying things out loud like they're in a better place. But it's not like just thinking and saying, it's like feeling like I know they are. And that feeling, I think, and then probably yourself dying is another whole thing of knowing. It's another level, but it's like that knowing, I think, doesn't go anywhere.
Which is the same knowing we have when we're 5, which is the same knowing we have when we're 45, right? That's the intuition. That's it. That's the thing that connects us all. It's what's underneath every single human.
Seems like a good place to end it, like on a cliffhanger,
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for coming on, Ali. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Same. Had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you. When can people expect to find your book, and where?
So where's a good question, because I haven't quite finalized that yet, but if they it will be published next month in November. It's just about ready to go. It's called Holding Hands in the Dark, is part 1, and part 2, which is in the same book, is Lessons Learned in the Dark. I've not decided where it's going to be. I think it'll be on Amazon for sure, but I haven't got any definite plans yet. I'm still in the process of it. So yeah, I will let you know when I know for certain, and then you can help me promote it.
100%. All right. Thanks so much, Ali.
No worries.